Angel recently announced his retirement from pro play, so in honor of one of the most legendary IGLs ever, I wanted to talk about something he knew how to do very well, which was to entry for his team.
Angel needs to get something now, and you can see Angel almost just run. Picked up the knife as well. Flashes to work with here, but Angel, he's about to.
Throughout Angel's entire Tier 1 career, he died 486 times and earned 393 First Bloods, which is a lot of experience entering at the highest level. Although his number of first engagements has gone down in recent years, at one point in his career, he was taking more than 30% of all his team's first engagements, which seems absolutely crazy for someone who isn't even playing Duelist. A lot of people might have made fun of him for this, but in this video, I want to look back on some key moments in his career to talk about the topic of entry. What does it actually mean to be a good entry for your team? Why did Angel take so many opening engagements to begin with? And how did he make it all work so well? Let's find out what a legendary TAC FPS IGL sees in opening fights that we don't. To fully understand Angel's art of dying first, I want to look at this topic from 3 different perspectives: a data perspective, an IGLing perspective, and finally a team role perspective. Obviously, these are all interconnected, so we'll probably be jumping back and forth throughout the video, but let's start with looking at some really cool data about Angel's first engagements. I plotted Angel's first engagement data for every single Tier 1 event he participated in, all the way back to 2022 when he led FPX to a Masters win. The green line is Angel's total proportion of first engagements relative to his team. For example, when Angel won Masters Copenhagen in 2022, he was taking nearly 26% of all his team's first engagements, which is kind of crazy because most hard entry duelists are barely over 30% in this stat. The orange line is Angel's first blood percentage, which is how often he actually won those opening fights. Both of these stats really peaked for him in 2023, where he was both a very good entry, winning upwards of 50% of all his first engagements, but also took an insane number of first engagements for his team. Let's start by going back to 2023 when he was still a controller player and easily one of the best entries in the world. During the double initiator meta of 2023, we'd see Angel work as the second duelist with very aggressive Omen TPs to entry sites alongside Jet. Now this isn't necessarily that rare because we do see stuff like this where Omen's TPing in the Jet smoke, but I want to emphasize that there were a lot, and I mean a lot of rounds that Navi used to run which set up Angel as the main entry. We would see rounds like this where Angel Omen ults instantly into key positions and his first fight basically decides the entire fate of the round. Here's a round on Ascent against Carmen Corp, where Navi quickly scales through a main and Angel instantly TPs out towards Jen by himself. His own Jet is not even remotely close when he makes this play, but Angel has a plan in mind and he commits to execution of his entry. The rest of his team supports him while he slowly clears sight, and then he coordinates a fight into tree with his players coming up cat to open up the round and set up his team for a really strong post plan. So why and how does this playstyle even work? Most people would assume that it's bad to risk losing your smokes player on attack, but is that really true? Going back to some data work done by Pablo in 2023, who's now on Team Heretics, he looked at the untraded first death loss rate for each agent on attack. For example, if you died first on Breach in 2023, your team had an 80.6% chance of losing that round on attack. What this data really tells us is which agents were more important to keep alive in the 2023 meta, and it actually shows that agents like Brimstone and Omen, which were Angel's main controller picks, were actually less important to keep alive than all the initiators and even duelists like Jet or Raze. It was actually statistically optimal in 2023 to have your controller player entry for your team, and that's exactly when Angel was doing it the most. This data also kind of aligns with role theory when you think about certain world-class duelist players who have transitioned into playing Omen or Brimstone at a very high level. Players like Tens, or even more recently the PRX duo of Jing and Forsaken, have been able to pick up Omen and Brimstone and continue playing them in a very aggressive manner to championship winning levels of success. Entering on Omen and Brim makes a lot more sense than you'd initially think, and this isn't just a statistic from an older meta. I replicated this data analysis for the 2025 season, and even though the difference isn't as prominent as before, Omen and Brimstone are still much less important to keep alive on attack than most other initiators and even duelists, with Vice, Jet, and Tejo being the most important agents to keep alive in 2025. The other agents at the top of this list are very interesting to see, as Teo is the obvious agent you want to keep alive as long as possible on attack, but Vice is definitely unexpected, and Jet is clearly just becoming more and more of a bait character than a hard entry duelist. All of this data shows that it actually makes a lot of sense for Angel to be entering on controllers, but there are still a lot more factors that make this a good choice. There's a lot of discussion on the differences of IGLing from different positions and roles, and Angel is definitely an interesting case where he's playing the controller role, but is one of the main entries for his team, and there are certainly advantages of being an entry IGL. One of the biggest advantages of this is that you'll always be able to take the best timings possible. You never need to tell your entry when to peek because you know exactly when the best opportunities are based on the strategies you're calling. In this round against Liquid on Fracture, Angel TPs up B main quickly while he calls for his team to create pressure towards Arcade. Now he's in the perfect position to take a timing and calls for the Fatal to create pressure, which he instantly earns first blood from. When an IGL is the one actually executing the most important part of a plan, this will always be done on perfect timings, which is a big reason why Angel was so successful at entrying. If we go back to that earlier example on Ascent, where Angel looks like he's just entrying crazily, the real reason he's so confident is because he's made the read that Karman Corp are playing retake with their Killjoy ult. This is why he expected so little resistance on site, and why he decided to set up for an opening fight into Tree before calling his team out to come plant, because he's planned to take control of Tree to counter that retake. All of this clearly worked, as Karman Corp are forced to retake with a suboptimal Killjoy ult from Heaven instead of the one from Tree. This is an example of how Angel is combining his IGL reads with his entering skill to play a very important role in these strategies. In this clip at Masters Tokyo against NRG on Split, Navi starts with 4 players mid and 1 player in A main. Viper towards A never had the real goal of lurking, but likely wanted to get hit by the Sky info just to fake pressure. Navi takes control of mid and it forces NRG to put up their Viper Orb. And while the Viper Orb is up, NRG loses that information for a bit and Angel calls for his team to group up towards B. Right when the Viper Orb goes down, Angel smokes stairs and entries into vents. This pressure, combined with that Viper lurk wall on A, looks as if it's selling a mid-A split, which pulls NRG's attention into mid and A. You can even see Sky and Screens get a bit worried about the ramp lurk after Angel makes this play. Now NRG are confused and looking for a reclear mid, but Navi uses timing to flood out B main and take control of the site. Angel was able to execute this complicated macro round because he knew the exact macro timings to run the fake, and he did it himself. Once the main strategy gets you onto site and into a post plant, the rest of the round is more up to individual micro and small team fighting scenarios, and that's when Angel is confident letting his teammates close out the round, especially when his previous teammates were players like Artis, CNED, Xiao, Sugetsu, and Zipan, who were all incredibly strong mechanical players. Another example of this type of system working was 2023 EG, where Boostio would set up the macro needed to take his own opening fights, then let his clutch players in Calm, Ethan, and Demon 1 close out the rounds while Boostio helped call plays and information while dead. But honestly, I feel like we often underestimate Angel's actual mechanical ability. His raw aim might not be comparable to the top players, but his understanding of movement, timings, and other techniques make up for his aim and are arguably much more important for an entry to have. In this clip from FPX in 2022, he takes hookah control off a KO flash, but runs in perfectly with the flash to try to timing enemies trying to turn from it, and still has the precision to dodge it when it does actually pop. In this clip, when he's entering for FPX in Long B, you can see him crouch peek the first angle to avoid crosshair placement, but is still able to come out wide from the corner, which allows Zipan and Xiao to peek perfectly behind him. In this clip, where he completely destroys Jing in Shower, he again crouch peeks the first angle in a way that prevents him from dying, but also allows him to get information, and then he uses that info to pre-fire Jing and delete him before he has a chance. There's no way any of these defenders in these situations playing against Angel would dare say his mechanics are bad, because the way he uses his micro techniques and movement makes it really hard for defenders to deal with on the entry. All of this is to say that Angel's system may have seemed unconventional, but it actually made a lot of sense and worked perfectly with his individual and team's strengths. His his teams were all among the best during this time, so their system was clearly working. But in more recent years, Angel swapped to an initiator role, and with that, he mostly dropped his old entering playstyle. This is why we see a clear dip in his first engagement proportion in 2025, when he started to develop into a different type of player and fell back to a heavier minimap management playstyle. What I mean by this is that he'll support his team with util and then play the weaker side by himself, trying to create more lurky timings rather than creating the main pressure himself. But occasionally, we'll still see the old Angel when he pulls out an agent like Gecko, who from the first death agent loss probability graph was clearly a less important agent to keep alive with the third lowest chance of losing if they die first. In these cases, he's once again able to unleash some of his old entering habits and open up rounds for his team. It's good for him to have expanded his playstyle, especially with the addition of different teammates to the Navi roster over the last 2 years, but I definitely miss the old Angel a bit because he really mastered the art of dying first, and I just knew I had to make this video when he announced his retirement to show everyone what a beauty it truly was. If you made it all the way to the end of the video, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.